Good evening all, and welcome. Let's get straight into it. Sergeant Martin Blake, a Metropolitan Police Service firearms officer, was charged with the murder of Chris Kaba following a fatal shooting incident in September 2022. The case revolved around a police operation in Streatham, South London, where Mr. Kaba, a 24-year-old man, was shot dead by Sergeant Blake during a police stop aimed at addressing gang violence. Circumstances that led up to this shooting. On the night of September the 5th, 2022, Kaba was driving an Audi Q8 that had been linked to a shooting incident the previous day. The vehicle was recognised by officers and subsequently hemmed in by police cars in Kirkstall Gardens. During the confrontation, Mr. Kaba attempted to escape by ramming his vehicle into police cars, which Sergeant Blake perceived as a threat to his colleagues' lives. Believing that one of his fellow officers was in imminent danger, Sergeant Blake fired his weapon through the car's windshield, fatally wounding Mr. Kaba. So then there was a trial. Sergeant Martin Blake was charged with murder and stood trial at the Old Bailey. Throughout the trial, he maintained that he did not intend to kill Kaba, but acted out of necessity to protect his colleagues and the public. The prosecution argued that Blake misjudged the situation. However, defence testimonies from other officers indicated that they too felt threatened and were close to using lethal force themselves. The jury deliberated over the evidence presented during the two-week trial and ultimately acquitted Sergeant Blake of murder. They concluded that his belief in the necessity of using force was honestly held and reasonable under the circumstances. Note, they only debated for 3 hours. The verdict sparked protests of a minor nature, and for some reason most of the people appeared to be white, and criticism was forthcoming from Mr. Kaba's family and supporters who felt justice had not been served on this occasion. So following his acquittal, Sergeant Blake faced significant personal and professional challenges. He'd been suspended from duty throughout the legal proceedings, but was reinstated immediately after the verdict. The case highlighted broader issues concerning police accountability and community trust, particularly within black communities. The Independent Office for Police Conduct is reviewing whether disciplinary proceedings against Sergeant Blake are warranted, despite his acquittal. Now, I'll move on to points to discuss in a second. There's a couple of things that have broke today. Yvette Cooper has indicated that police officers that are subsequently charged in these kinds of incidents will remain anonymous now until the point of conviction. I'm not quite sure how to react to that one at the moment, because I've only found out about it within the last hour. But I think what we can do, we can go through much of this. We'll go through much of the incident, I think, and we'll steer. I'm going to steer clear of whether Kaba was a bad boy or not, because I don't care about his past in a purely dispassionate way that we're going to look at this. It doesn't matter what he did prior to this actual incident, because we're only going to deal with the facts at hand and what happened that night. So, but before we do that, thank you for coming along and joining in the chat, those that have. You may notice that we now have a new support me at the bottom. You can see it here. And it has a new sound. So there you go. And you know how to operate it. You know, if you go on and support me while we're live, a suitable sound will sound A sound will be sung, and your message that you have typed in, as long as you don't use bad words, will be read out in a suitably robotic or even AI-like voice. Anyway, that's if you feel like supporting me at all. I mean, many of you probably won't. Now, let's have a look at what happened. So the guy's driving an Audi Q8. It's a big car. It's a heavy car. It's a powerful car. And I don't know if you've seen the video or not, but I'm not going to show the video. But the video has him squeezing in between two cars, and he's running forward and back as he makes these cars further apart. And yeah, he had. No, your subscriptions will be fine, guys. Everything will keep running. So he's going forward and back all the time as the police are gathered round them, and they're shouting. They are shouting quite clearly, armed police. But the car is revving quite loudly, and it's moving, and you hear the tyres are squealing. He's forcing the cars apart, and the cop that shot him, Sergeant Blake, is standing in front of the vehicle. Now, there are other police officers to the sides, and I heard one of them in the video saying, "Watch out," to one of his colleagues as the car kind of semi-swerved to one side. So the whole situation is fraught with danger and confusion. And then a shot rings out, and the car stops, basically. So any danger to life at that point was finished. So the question is, was his actions using this vehicle tantamount to him being armed? And, you know, being armed doesn't just mean that you have a firearm or a knife or a club. You know, anything can be construed as being armed if you are using it to effect or to threaten the effective harm of others. So it doesn't have to be an actual device. It can be something like a car. In fact, cars are very often used as weapons in the modern times, as you've seen, no doubt, from many videos and things on Twitter, where people are always running each other down and having fights with them in the middle of the street. So the question is, was the shooting righteous? Because was there a clear and present danger to life? And in my view, I think that there was a danger to life, because a car being used in that kind of manner, high revs, wheels spinning, sliding all over the road, pushing other cars out of the way, any second it could break free and the police officers would be in the way, and someone was bound to be injured, if not killed. So I think stopping it was appropriate. Now, that's one point that would go, for the fact that it appeared to be a genuine case of a fear for life of others, in which case a police officer is empowered to act. And in fact, any member of the public is empowered to act, even to the occasion where it can be fatal for the perpetrator, if you are acting in the defence of life to another. But usually what will happen is you will end up in court and you will have to defend your position, because taking someone's life is no easy matter, and police officers aren't going to do this on a whim. Obviously, there are always exceptions that you think people are a bit, gung-ho and whatever. But I would contend by the time you've made it to sergeant and an authorised firearms officer, you've tempered your enthusiasm to a degree. The next question is, he was shot in the forehead. And people are asking, why was he shot in the head? Now, I wasn't there, obviously, The situation was confused. I think the officer was using a carbine, in which case he's either using probably an H&K MP5 or possibly a G36, again an H&K. I believe the G36 is more favoured these days, especially in armed firearms or firearms response vehicles, because it has a better penetration on when used against vehicles, which obviously this was. The G36 uses a 5.56 millimeter NATO round, and the MP5 generally uses 9 millimeter hollow point to avoid over penetration. I don't know about you, but most of the young people I see, and when I say young, I mean 20s, 30s, when they're driving their car, seem to do it in a strange manner that they think they're driving a Formula One car and recline the seat as far as they can, so their head's as low as it possibly can be. In fact, in some cases, I've seen people who can barely see over the steering wheel or dashboard. And they drive like this. I don't know if it makes them think that they're a Formula One driver or something. But really, to get the best view, you want to be sitting as upright as possible. And if you're sitting as upright as possible, and this is where we come into the thing where I have to say again, when Sergeant Blake said during the trial that he did not intend to kill Kaba, it doesn't matter. Because a police officer shooting someone never intends to kill them. What they intend to do is to stop them. And that's what the police do. They shoot to stop. Now, to stop someone, you've got to hit them. And to hit them, you've got to make sure that you're firing at the biggest part of the mass, which is usually the centre of the chest. And that's where most firearms officers would, put the bullet or aim the gun. Now, on this occasion, he got hit in the forehead. Is it possible that with the headlights on, with the car coming towards him, with the car pulling back, that when he took the shot, he couldn't see the actual driver and just put it into the driver's seat? And if Kaba was, semi-recumbent in the seat, there's a good chance he got hit in the head. That's a possibility. I don't know. I'm only speculating at this point. But police do not shoot to kill. Police shoot to stop. And to do that, you have to hit the person. And the worst thing that can happen in a police situation is you fire your firearm and you miss. Because then you don't know where the bullet is going and you don't know the effect it's going to have on possible bystanders, your colleagues. Anyone who's not involved in a situation could be struck by that bullet. So you can't afford to miss. You're always pointing at the main part of the main part of mass. Now, in this day and age, sometimes people use body armour, and there are strategies for dealing with that. I'm not quite sure what the Met strategy is, because one of my colleagues had a different strategy to the one that I was taught. But ours was always, if you put two into their body and they don't fall down, then you shoot them in the hip to break the pelvis and drop them to the ground, and thereafter, if they will probably still be moving because they won't have stopped, and thereafter you put one in the head. Now, that sounds horrific, but again, and this might sound quite callous, but the person dying isn't the problem here. The person continuing to move and continuing to act and to continue to carry out any kind of, aggressive action towards you is what you want to avoid. So there are strategies to deal with people who are wearing body armour. I don't think they were employed in this case. I think, like someone in the chat said, possible there was a deflection from the glass of the windscreen, because laminated windscreen glass is going to change the direction of the bullet possibly. It's going through 2 layers of glass and a layer of plastic at the minimum, and it's hard glass. So there's a chance it could have deflected the bullet slightly. I would have thought given the fact that they choose to shoot at the driver, that he would have been aiming at what would have been the likely centre of mass, given where a normal person would be sitting in the driving seat. That's my view. So he hit the target, which is a bonus point because the bullet did then not proceed beyond the confines of that vehicle. It was kept within the confines of the vehicle, and no one else was injured. Now, someone asked on Twitter today, why did the police not shoot out the tyres? And that's taking us straight back to, where's the bullet going to go? And when you look at, remember, tyres are made of rubber and steel. They have steel belts over them. So there's a good chance a tyre can actually deflect a bullet rather than take it right in. Or if it does go, say, through the sidewall, it could go right through the other sidewall. Now, I did reply to that person. I said, unlike Hollywood, shooting out a car tyre doesn't stop the car. Having a flat tyre doesn't stop a car. I've chased a Porsche for 8 miles with 3 wheels. I mean, it didn't have a flat tyre, it had 3 wheels. He completely knocked one of the front corners off the car in a crash and kept going. So it's amazing what you can do with a car if you're full of adrenaline and completely regardless of any consequences. You should have seen the state of the road after it. So you don't shoot tyres out. We have devices, the spike strips that you put across the road to put out tyres. You're not going to deploy that in this kind of situation because everything's too volatile. The car's moving too much. And it's too dangerous to try and put. And then, of course, if you put it in a situation where people are moving around like that around the vehicle to try and get at the driver, there's a good chance somebody could stand on it. And you do not want to stand in these things. They're like massive hypodermic needles. That's basically all they are. Yeah, as Ray says, he drove in 3 flat tyres once. I mean, you can do it. Nobody's going to recommend it. But you can continue to drive on flat tyres. You can drive on rims. You can drive without tyres. And, it's just people seem to think that if you shoot out the tyres, a car will stop. No, it won't. Not if the driver's determined enough. And the problem then is the more the car gets disabled, the less the driver has control. And yet he keeps going. And the more that puts other people in danger because we're not out in the middle of nowhere here. We're in a city. So there's a high chance there's going to be people that are put into danger if he gets away, if he continues to proceed. So I think in balance, everything so far is pointing to it being a righteous shooting. There's nothing to say that he shouldn't have been shot because there was a genuine fear that he was going to injure someone. And that's regardless. We're not taking anything into account about his previous background. So the next question is was he shot because he was black? I don't know why people bring this up. I was at a police shooting where we shot and killed a guy, and he wasn't black; he was white. Everybody can have a bad day. Things can go wrong, and sometimes situations spiral completely out of control. And I don't think colour has anything to do with it. And you can look at the stats all you like, and there are statistics there that show you that most of the crime in London comes under a certain demographic. Now, I don't know why. Is it social deprivation? Is it lack of intelligence? Is it bad education? Is it trying to prove things to others? Is it gang culture or whatever? All these things can all add up. I don't know. I'm not trying to give you a solution for it. But I think that the majority of crime fall under a certain demographic in London, and the fact is that most of the crime is disproportionately attributed to subgroups. So while the population may not be that colour, then the people that are committing crime appear to be. From the statistics. If you want to argue about statistics, that's fine. But you have to remember that the proportion of people against the other proportion of people are vastly outnumbered in who's committing the crime. And that again may be due to social issues, due to gang warfare, due to people trying to represent themselves and their community against other communities, but that's what seems to happen. So I don't think, and people say there's institutional racism. Well, it might sound like I'm institutionally racist here because I'm calling out statistics that are telling me that most of the crime's going to be committed by certain groups, and the same thing applies. When you've got, Scotland, for instance, has a population that's 95.5% white, and yet there's a disproportionate amount of crime is committed by non-whites. I don't know why. I can only tell you what the statistics tell me. Should armed police have special legal protection? No, I don't think they should. I think maybe keeping them anonymous, especially in regard to what's happened in this case, because apparently, and this is this is not speculation. This is an allegation at the moment, but the allegation is there was a £10,000 bounty out to anyone who's able to take out Sergeant Blake. That's not acceptable in the kind of society that we're supposed to be living in. I think keeping police officers who have been involved in these situations anonymous up to the point of conviction helps to address that, but does it really? Because that kind of thing needs to be stamped out at a very different level. If people are starting to do that, we are starting to become a third world country. We're beginning to sound like a South American junta rather than, a civilized society. So it's very disappointing. Other than that, though, police officers don't need any special legal protections, I don't think. In fact, if anything, police are held and should be held to a higher standard than the general population, because police officers are trained in the application of the law. And if they break that law while trying to apply it, then they should be knowing what they're doing. Therefore, the law should come down heavier on them. And it's supposed to. If a police officer does something like, if a police officer steals something, he should get a heavier sentence than someone who's not a police officer. Because one, he's in a position of trust, and two, he's been trained and is able to apply the law, so knows when not to break it. So I think I don't think police officers need any relaxation of standards. If anything, the way it should be is they are held to a higher standard, and I see no reason for that not to continue. Because if they are not the highest standard of the law, then we shouldn't have them as police officers. And if we can't trust them, we shouldn't have the police as it stands. That is a completely other question altogether, though. I don't know where we would go from there. But if you want to live in a civilized society, you will always have people that will push the bounds to the point where someone's got to take them under control. And if you don't want to do it, then what we have done is delegated it to a group, and we call that group the police. If we don't like what that group's doing, then we need to change that. We need to change that as a society. not as individuals. So I think that's all the questions that I brought to the table myself. Do you guys have anything to say? Is there anything you want to question in my thinking, or can I explain anything further? Ray says he was just watching some American cops stealing from a guy's home from their own body cams. Yeah, I mean, if the police are doing that, they should be locked up. You know, there's no excuse for that. No excuse whatsoever. So I think it needs to be dealt with, and people need to. They were locked up. Good. And as I said, police need to hold themselves to a higher standard anyway. But the law does hold them to a higher standard. By the same token, the law used to hold people to a higher standard if you assaulted a police officer in the execution of his duty, and that if you interfered with someone who was trying to execute the law, then you got a higher sentence. I don't know if they still do that, but we had 2 charges in Scotland. We had assault, which was when someone assaults someone else, and then if someone assaulted the police officer in the execution of their duty, they got charged with police assault, and that attracted a higher crime, a higher sentence. Sorry. So Julie says she thinks I've covered it all. I don't know if it was any useful to you at all, but I'm just fed up with people on Twitter that they just come out with stupid suggestions like, you know, the police shouldn't be allowed to execute people. No one is going out there to execute someone unless they are a psychopath. If they're a psychopath, they'll be found out. That MP or who was it? Some activist said that there's only been one cop ever prosecuted for manslaughter, I think. No firearms officers have ever been convicted of murder. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that shows us that our police officers aren't going around murdering people willy-nilly. And I really don't think they are, because as a firearms officer, you have a terrible weight of responsibility on you when you've got your finger on that trigger. This isn't playing soldiers in the woods with your mates when you're 12, you know. This is a lethal weapon that if you pull that trigger, and you will have aimed it properly because you're going to hit what you're pointing at, because you've been trained to a standard that you don't miss. You know, if you're putting 100 rounds down the range, if you get more than 2 off the target, you know, and when I say off the target, that's outside the 7 ring. If you get more than 2 out of the 7 ring, you're out. That's it. You failed. You know, so you always put your bullets where you're aiming. If you pull that trigger, there's always a very high chance that the person that you're going to hit is not going to survive it. And people say the most stupid things like, you know, shoot them in the arm, shoot them in the leg. You can't guarantee a hit in a limb. That's why you don't shoot at limbs. Nobody shoots at limbs. There's no point. You want to bring someone down, you shoot them in the pelvis, which is still basically the centre of mass. It's just slightly lower. And you'll break their pelvis and they'll fall over. You don't shoot someone in the leg. Generally, you don't shoot people that are running away. Generally. I think certain American states are allowed to do so. Some American states aren't. I know New York had some of the strictest regulations for police shootings. You couldn't shoot at someone if they were in a vehicle. You couldn't shoot at someone if they were running away. I don't know if it's changed since. It was harder for a civilian, and this is before they took away our handguns in the UK, but it was harder for a civilian to get a firearm in New York City than it was to get one in England or Scotland. That's changed, obviously, because the UK doesn't allow you to arm yourself with a handgun anymore at all. Yeah. I think the police are in a bit of a mess, and I blame the government, and I blame the politicians, and I don't just mean this government. I mean all the governments, because I think the problem is that the hierarchy in the police is it's very straightforward. It's like the military. You've got your ranks, and then you've got they get progressively less as you go up until you've got the guy at the top of the tree. And the guy at the top of the tree is a political appointment. That's the problem. And you've got people there that shouldn't be in those positions. You have people that have been fast-tracked, that have no experience. And the beauty of the police service was everybody starts as a constable and has to go through the ranks before you get to the lofty measure of, superintendent, chief superintendent, assistant chief constable, that kind of thing, if you ever get there. And I think what happens now is it's become way too political. And yeah, there's always been a part of it, because you're having to deal with, government functionaries, be it at local level and higher level when you're running a police service. But the government are now using the police basically as their bully boys. And that doesn't help, because it doesn't help the public who see two-tier policing being affected every time they look out the window. No one has any doubt that we are in effect oppressed as normal white people. If we step out of line, we will get hammered. And if you're not a normal white person, you've got a better chance of not being persecuted. And that is crazy, because the stats say that our crimes are less frequent and less violent. But that seems to be what's happening, especially when it comes to protest. And again, there seems to be a clear political divide between people that follow government narratives and those that don't. And these may well be imagined, but it's very difficult looking at it as an impartial advisor to say, or an impartial observer to say, well, it's very difficult to apply that, to this group. Like, someone shouts and swears hurty words at the police, gets jailed for 2.5 years or whatever. Someone actually calls for people to be. He actually called for them to be killed. And you know who I'm talking about, Ricky Jones. And is now out on bail, I believe. So the question is, if that's not two-tier policing and a two-tier justice system, what is it? What is it? They're sending the police around to have a word with people who haven't committed an actual crime, but they want to check their thinking. I mean, what are we thinking? Sending the police around to check people's thinking. That to me beggars belief. And yet, people that commit serious crimes get suspended sentences. The whole justice system seems to be upside down. And you have to remember that in many cases, the police perform only the first part of the function. They go out and catch people. They basically do what they're told. They go out and catch people and bring them back, and then the justice system deals with them. And I don't think it's working. I don't think it's working properly. And I think, like I said, I think the governments are using the police as their bully boys. They're putting their own agenda down through the rank and file from the top all the way down. And basically, if you don't comply, then you're not going to find yourself in a job. And being a police officer's a well-paying job in this day and age. So, yeah, I think the government needs to butt out of the police. I think that's the problem. The police needs to be a more independent organisation than it actually is, because it's too closely linked with the justice system and the government. It needs to be hived off. So does that then say that we should have a system like in America with the sheriffs, where your sheriff is locally elected and the people can determine whether he's doing a good job or not and not elect him? I don't know. Does your sheriff then become a politician rather than a police officer? I don't know. Does your sheriff get paid off by corrupt officials? But then again, if you are able to vote him out, I don't know. I don't have the answers, unfortunately, but I think you're right. The police service needs rejigged, and the government needs to get the hell out of Dodge. I think the government has claws into way too many organisations and way too many structures. It needs to stop being so overreaching. We need smaller, more appropriate and nimble government, not this large behemoth that steamrolls over our wishes. I don't know anyone that wants to build wind farms. No one I speak to can see the benefits of building wind farms when energy prices are going through the roof. And everybody says, why don't we build nuclear power stations? Why don't we build nuclear power stations? I don't know. We should have been building them like 20 years ago. But yeah, I think we're right. Anyway, right. Yeah, so Ricky is out on bail until January. Yep, that is disturbing. I think Ray, that's a very good point. And if I would give anyone any advice, it's you've got to be very, very careful if you're into the situation where you're involved with the police, and you have to be very careful about what you say. But certainly, other than name, age, date of birth, and address, you don't really need to provide any other information. And that's only if you've been charged or are a material witness to a crime. Then the police have the power to require your name and address. Other than that, they don't, unless you're operating a moving motor vehicle. So, I mean, there's a lot of times, most times people are going to give the police their name and address. If you choose not to, though, you haven't committed a crime and you don't want to give them your name and address, there is no reason for you to do so. And if they arrest you for that, that will be found to be a wrongful arrest. But remember, police officers are humans with all the faults that humans have. Sometimes those faults include lying. So unless you've got someone to back you up, be very, very careful about what you say and how you behave if you're in those kind of situations. Yeah. Hello, Amy. I think we're just about done. Yep, fell asleep. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers it all. I was trying my using my background thing just as an aside. Since we're at the end of it, let me know what you think about this. See how it looks. So if I go to here and turn on the filter, I want to see if it's effective at all. So how does that look? Is it too off-putting? Because it does trim off sections. Sometimes, like the chair kind of moves. One of my epaulets has disappeared. I just wondered if it's any use at all, if it would be okay. Off-putting, says Ray. Yeah. Yeah, I thought that as well. Yeah. Okay. How did you get on with the cops that caught you speeding? Did they give you a ticket? Or did they let you off with it? What kind of cops were they? Were they real? Sorry. Were they beat cops or traffic cops? You like the new background better? What, the one I just put on? Better if I faced it. It probably would be, Ray. Yeah, for you guys, yeah. No action taken. Beat cops. Excellent. Be polite, be respectful, say I'm terribly sorry, it won't happen again, and they'll let you off with it. Yeah. I was driving my Jeep and there was this huge freaking traffic queue and there was no reason for it other than people being stupid, and I was going completely the other way and the road was clear, but to get to the road that was clear I had to bump over a curb. And I'd scanned the area and thought, oh, we're okay, and unfortunately, boom. Police car saw me, so pulled me over. I came up to the car, started talking, and I goes, "Look, I'm terribly sorry, officers. It was completely out of character for me. I'm in a hurry, but there was no excuse for what I did. And you're quite right to take whatever action you need to take." And they said, "Yeah, just don't do it again." But then again, if I know I'm in the right, I can be a real arsehole. Right, okay. Thank you very much, people. It's been great for me, and I hope that's been useful for you and not too onerous. But I think I had to put some of these things on Twitter right because they're just like, it's like, I mean, it was like remember when the boat hit the bridge and everybody's going on about, this and that, and I mean, it's quite obvious what happened, Nobody hacked the boat to try and knock a bridge down. That's just the most. I mean, listen to what I just said. Is that not the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard? The Russians hacked the boat to try and knock down a bridge to bring down the economy of the United States by blocking one harbour on the East Coast. Yeah, that's how you do it. Yeah, okay. Right. Tomorrow night, it is Ed and I as we go head to head with cryptid to cryptid. So we'll have a little cryptid battle, and I hope you enjoy that. So be there or be square. I'm not quite sure what's happening on Friday. We may have special guest star because I know Ed's off, but we may have special guest star. So take care. Right, see you guys later. Bye bye. Stand down.